At 77, I was used to life turning me into transparent glass, but the invisibility I experienced that day, at that bus stop, was something else. I was dressed in a navy blue skirt suit, squirming in my heels, watching the twilight fall over an empty street. I was waiting for a car that wouldn't come. "It won't be long," they had once said. "Mommy, Rachel," he had whispered on the phone after the wedding reception. "Wait at the bus stop near Main and Spruce. We'll pick you up on our way back." I didn't question it, I just nodded, even if he couldn't see it. And even though my heart felt something strange with that phrase, "after the reception," I told myself it was just a matter of programming, simple logistics. I even smiled as I hung up the phone. This was 6 hours ago. By now, the wedding should have been over. The town had fallen silent. The few passing cars didn't even slow down. There were no familiar faces. Beside me was a modest but thoughtful gift in a small box of cookies I had baked that morning. On the bench, 2 little ones accompanied me like a futile offering. I fidgeted on the wooden bench, my legs aching. I had never liked this bench. It faced the gas station, and the air always carried a faint smell of tires and fried food. But Rachel had said this stop, not the one next to the park, and I didn't want to complicate things. I didn't want to be difficult. A boy trapped in his own world, echoing in his headphones, passed me on a bike. He didn't even look at me twice. No one looked. I checked my phone again, no signal, just a blinking low battery icon. I thought about charging it, but between baking cookies, ironing the skirt, and writing the little note to Rachel, I had forgotten. Once upon a time, many times she would remind me. "Mom, don't forget the charger," she would say, half smiling, half sighing as if I were a child. But those days were over. "It'll be small," he said, "just between family." Her fiancé's family was paying, so there were limits. "You'll still be a part of it. We'll work something out." I should have noticed the hesitation in his voice, the hasty glossing over of details, but I wanted to believe him. I always wanted to believe him. The last city bus creaked past, its lights shining against the darkness. It didn't stop. As I watched its taillights disappear, somewhere inside me, a door softly closed. I was unforgotten. I was an outcast. And believe me, those two things are not the same. The breeze was getting colder. I hugged the cookie tin tightly, not to keep warm, but to find something to hold on to. Someone laughed from one of the houses behind me, a warm, hearty laugh. In my mind's eye, I envisioned a living room full of voices oblivious to my presence. Rachel's voice echoed in my brain. "Just wait at the bus stop." I waited all night until the streetlights went out, until the sky turned gray, until the baker's van appeared on the road. Too early in the morning, too late at night. I stood up, my body stiff, and grabbed my high heels and started walking home with my back straight. I didn't cry, not yet. That came later. By the time I got home, the sun was beginning to break through the cues, illuminating the peeling paint on the porch and the grass growing in the cracks of the front steps. The key in my hand, I stopped for a moment, not wanting to go inside. The weight in my chest hadn't moved. It just settled like dust in an untouched room. Inside the house, there was a faint smell of lemon polish and the porridge I had left on the stove. I walked past the coal pot, put the cookies on the counter, and carefully placed the unopened gift on the hall table. It looked ridiculous there. Small silver ribbon, neat, square corners. I had wrapped it so carefully. Inside was a handwritten card for Rachel and Tom. "Much love, Mom." I made my tea without tasting it, then sat down at the kitchen table and plugged in my phone. The screen flickered to life. Notifications began to flow. One of them froze me. It was a photo shared by Rachel's new sister-in-law, a girl I'd only met once. It showed the happy couple under chains of golden light, surrounded by smiling faces. The caption read, "A perfect evening, just family." I looked at her for a long time. I zoomed in. There was Rachel in her cream lace dress, holding the bouquet just the way she wanted it. Tom, tall and a little clumsy, grinning. Her parents, her siblings, Rachel's cousins, her friends from college, her godmother, everyone but me. "Just family," the explanation repeated. I pressed the phone to my chest as if I could silence the pain. A simple sentence that someone wrote without thinking, but sharp as a knife that cuts the skin. I tried to find an alternative explanation. Maybe he meant something else. Maybe he didn't see the explanation. Maybe he didn't think it was important. Maybe the photographer insisted on taking a quick snap and he'd make it up to her later. A separate celebration, a brunch, a silent apology. But then I saw the next photo and the next. There was nothing separate. There was a meal, a long candle-lit table with name cards and linen napkin. Laughter, dancing, toasts, a slideshow of Rachel and Tom's life. Baby pictures, their college days, their first apartment. There was nothing of me, not a single image, not a single reminder. I was deliberately, willingly erased. I sat at the table, my tea untouched, my hands curled in my lap. I tried to remember the last time Rachel looked at me without a hint of shame. The last time she asked, "How are you?" Not, "What can I do?" When was the last time I felt like I was his mother, not his problem? Years ago, a long time ago, there was a time when we were close. After his father died, it was just the two of us. I worked double shifts at the clinic, skipped meals so he could buy school books, saved every penny for ballet lessons and braces. I didn't expect thanks, I just expected us to be each other's home. But slowly, insidiously, things began to change. It started in college when he stopped phoning, when he only came home for vacations, then never came home at all, when he started referring to my house as the old place, my clothes as weird, and me sometimes as a bit much. Of course he wouldn't say it directly, but I would see it in his eyes and hear it in his seas. I was no longer a source of strength or a refuge, but a burden. The wedding made it official. I got up from the table and walked to the mirror in the hall. The woman looking back at me was small, pale, with bruises under her eyes. Her hair, still thick, was pulled back. The way Rachel always said, she looked tired. His hands, veiny and dry, still trembled slightly, but his spine was straight and his eyes, despite everything, determined. I took the gift from the table and opened it. Inside was a photo album that had taken me weeks. Rachel's childhood prints, photos I had digitized and edited myself. Each page told a story. Her first steps, her Halloween costume at 6, the time we made a snowman with mismatched mittens. I studied each page slowly, as if saying goodbye. Then I put the album back in its box, took it to the trash can, and let the lid close. My daughter had thrown me out. I was just paying a return visit. I lay in bed with my lamp on, watching the shadows of the ceiling change with the passing hours. I got up around 3 a.m. and made a toast I didn't eat. At 5 a.m. I started writing a list. Not a list of groceries or chores, but a list of memories. Not the hot ones, not birthdays or lullabies. It's all the others. The time Rachel insisted I stay in the kitchen while she came home from college to visit her new boyfriend. "You're just making it awkward, Mom," she said, hurrying past me. I laughed, pretending I hadn't heard. When she borrowed $4,000 from me for a course she never finished. He promised to pay it back and never mentioned it again. The day I brought her soup when she was sick, when she kindly, politely told me that next time I should text her first. I kept writing until the paper ran out. But then, of course, I remembered the years before all this, the real years when he was small and everything between us was simple. I remembered the winter when she had the flu and how I spent 3 nights without sleep to keep her upright so she could breathe. How I hummed the same lullabies in the rocking chair until my throat cracked. I remembered making Halloween costumes by hand, sewing tiny felt ears for the mouse costume, gluing feathers for the owl costume. "My mom made this," she would proudly tell people. And I remembered when her father, my husband Tom, died, how she crawled into my bed and cried until morning, holding my wrist as if she was afraid I would disappear too. What had I done with those years? I had folded them into casseroles, school buses, and savings accounts. I had traded them for security, for her comfort, for her luck. I had told myself over and over that love only meant giving, but I never questioned what I was getting in return. The funny thing is, I didn't really want much. A phone call, a birthday remembered without reminder, a visit unscheduled like a dentist appointment, a conversation not arranged for her convenience. These were the things I missed, not grandiose things, just those little human things that tell you that you are still visible. After breakfast, tea, toast, silence. I went to the sideboard and took out the box of old financial files. This was a habit I picked up in my nursing days. Everything labeled, everything organized. Inside were envelopes labeled Rachel University, Rachel Car, Rachel Down Payment. I opened one, a cashier's check from 2012 for $18,000 for the used Prius she wanted to drive around LA. "It's safer than the train, Mom," he said, "and I'll pay you in installments." The installments never came. I opened another envelope, bank statements from when I co-signed the apartment lease. Another, receipts for the wedding dress deposit. He didn't tell his fiancée that I helped him with this. I looked at the numbers, trying to feel something sharp, anger, resentment, but instead I felt a tired admiration. And the truth is, if she needed it one day, I would do it all over again. If she had come to me as a daughter, not as the manager of her image. But I wasn't going to let myself be erased anymore. Not quietly. In the afternoon, the phone rang. A message from Rachel. "Hi, Mom. I hope you got home safe and sound. I'm sorry we couldn't stop by. Things ran long, and Tom's parents have invited everyone over for drinks. See you soon. I love you. I love you." I looked at those two words. No apology, no acceptance, just a soft vine sentence, like a Band-Aid pressed to an open wound. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I stood up, turned on the kettle again, and went to my bedroom closet. I reached for the small wooden box on the top shelf. It was a locked box. I had lost the key a long time ago. Inside were documents I hadn't looked at in years. My will, some insurance forms, Tom's note to me before his surgery, the last one in clumsy handwriting saying he'd take care of our daughter. Soft in the middle, but strong where it matters. I used to believe that. I thought I could guide her with love, but maybe love without boundaries is not guidance. Maybe it's just surrender. And I was done surrendering. I went to the bank on a Thursday, not because I had urgent business, but because I really wanted to see what I had and what I still had to give. The young man at the counter looked at me with that polite smile reserved for old women who smell of lavender and carry bags with handkerchiefs in every corner. "I want to review my active transfers," I said in a calm voice, "and to see which accounts my daughter is linked to." She hesitated. "Of course, we can review recurring transactions, ma'am. As for linked accounts, I'm secondary on her mortgage," I said calmly, "and I cover his insurance policy, health, car, renters. I also make quarterly payments to his university for a loan I co-signed for 12 years ago. I can list it all if you want." His fingers trembled on the keyboard. "I'll open it right now, Ms. Morrison." I hadn't said that name in a long time, not since Tom died. For years I was Rachel's mom, or just mom. Now I wanted my name back. He printed a regular summary of my direct debits. 3 pages, single-spaced. I sat in the small consulting room reading each line like a page from someone else's book. Rent support, insurance, medical bills for Rachel's husband, who never called me anything but ma'am, tutoring for my granddaughter Lily, who hadn't visited in months. There was a $129 transfer every 2 weeks for Rachel's dog's groomer. I remembered the day she asked for it, lying, "Until things get better." That was 18 months ago. The last item froze me. A $2,000 payment scheduled for next week. A honeymoon contribution disguised as a gift. "I wasn't even at your wedding. Would you like to make a change, ma'am?" the banker asked gently. I looked at him. I really looked at him. A boy in a new suit, flawless skin, and I imagined his mother somewhere, probably still packing his lunch when he visited her. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to go through every outgoing payment and cancel most of them, except 2. Lily's college savings plan. She's only 13. And my donation to the local shelter. Everything else ends today." "What about the mortgage?" he asked. "You're listed as guarantor, but the payments come out of your account." "I'll let my daughter know. She's responsible for her own roof now." I signed the forms. My once elegant handwriting, though now slightly shaky, was still firm enough to leave a mark. When I got home, I stood in the hallway looking at the photos on the wall. Not the formal ones, not weddings or graduations. I focused on the quiet ones, Rachel asleep in my lap as a baby, her muddy soccer jersey and toothless smile, at the high school play, half hidden in the back. None of this was in the wedding slideshow. None of these memories had followed him into adulthood. I ran my fingers along the edges of the frame, as if trying to feel something again. Then I took them all down, not out of anger, but out of the need to make space for myself. It's a strange thing to realize that your child has turned into someone who can hurt you, not out of cruelty, but out of convenience. Because shame can be quiet, passive, and well-dressed. It can sound like just family and look like a polite smile that never reaches their eyes. Rachel called that night. I didn't answer, not out of resentment. I just didn't want to hear her voice before I started shaking. Instead, I opened a new notebook and wrote on the first page, "What do I want now?" It took me a long time to write the first item. Not to be useful, not to be needed, just to be treated like someone whose heart is still beating. And then I made tea. And for once, I was holding the cup with both hands, not holding it for someone else. The next message from Rachel came the next morning. No hello, no questions, just, "Mom, can I talk to you? There's been a misunderstanding." I stared at the screen for a point of time. Then, more calmly than I expected, I put the phone down and made toast. Dry, no butter. My stomach didn't want indulgence. He wanted clarity. Confusion, he said. That's what they always called it, wasn't it? When I wasn't included in family emails or ignored at Lily's school recital, it was always a mix-up, someone else's fault, or something overlooked. I was that nut. I slowly washed my cup and looked out the window. 2 houses away, the neighbor's daughter was planting flowers with her mother. A young woman in her late 20s, she had the same head bow and laughter as her mother. They looked like a couple, not exactly the same, but united. Watching them, you realize that they didn't need to rehearse love. It happened. I dried my hands and went back to my chair, picked up the phone again, and opened Rachel's message. There was still no follow-up. She hadn't called. She hadn't asked how I was after being left on a street bench 4 hours. No apology, just confusion. I replied, "No confusion. Please direct all future inquiries to your own bank accounts. As of yesterday, mine don't support you." I hit send before I could soften the words. 5 minutes later, he called. I didn't answer. I could imagine him with his hands in his hair, that slightly high-pitched note in his voice when he was cornered. He would use words like misunderstanding, unintentional, logistical. She might even cry. I had always been helpless against tears, but tears wouldn't wait 6 hours on a dark bench with you. Tears wouldn't rewrite titles like family only. So I hung up the phone. Around lunchtime, I heard the rattling of the mailbox. I wasn't expecting anything, but I went to check. Just bills and a glossy wedding magazine with Rachel's name on the address label. She'd had it sent to me a long time ago and had never changed it. I flipped through the pages carelessly, then threw them in the trash. In the afternoon, I opened the folder labeled Will and Legal and sat back down at the kitchen table. It was not out of revenge. It was out of a realization. I wasn't going to be the woman who quietly left her savings, her house, everything to a girl who she saw as a footnote, who would organize brunches in this house and smile sweetly at the guests and say, "This was my mother's place," as if I were a vase that once stood on a shelf. Everything still had my name on it, but not for long. I looked at the old will. Simple, standard, everything divided, most of it to Rachel, some for Lily's education. Rachel was the administrator. I took the pen, made a note to call my lawyer, then another note to talk to the credit union about reorganizing the deed to the house. I wasn't doing it because I wanted to hurt him. I was doing it because I believed that in the end, he might get hurt, and I couldn't allow that anymore. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees. The street was quiet except for the faint hum of someone's television coming through an open window. I watched the stars appear one by one and thought about silence. Not the kind that is lonely, but the kind that is powerful. The kind where no one shouts or demands or tugs at your heartstrings. The kind where only a woman sits with herself and knows that ultimately she doesn't need to be picked up, invited, or featured in a headline. The lawyer's office was warm, with shelves full of dusty books and a half-dead fuchsia plant in the corner. Mr. Harrington was older than I remembered, or maybe I was seeing more clearly now. He adjusted his glasses and looked at my file. "So," he said after a moment, "you want to make some changes to your estate plan?" "Yes," I said, "important changes." He nodded. "Are you still leaving anything to your daughter?" I looked at him over my folded hands. "Not this time." He didn't even blink, just turned a page. "What about your granddaughter?" This was the reason I had come. Lily was the only one who remembered my birthday without needing to be reminded. The only one who called me from school just to say hello. The only one who curled up next to me on the couch and asked about my childhood as if it mattered. He was 13 now, already slipping into that quiet world of adolescence where affection wanes and words are carefully chosen. But there was still something real, something unpolished about him. She had not yet learned to hide people into the background. "He's the only one I want to leave a legacy to," I said. "A college fund?" he asked. "Yes, but it's more than that. I want to start a foundation." He raised an eyebrow. "A full foundation with early access. It'll be 18 years old in 5 years. Even if I'm not around, I want him to know that someone believes in him, not because he's useful, but because he's kind." We spent the next hour preparing the paperwork. I gave instructions in a calm, familiar voice. I was surprised at how calm I felt. I wasn't drunk with victory. I wasn't bitter. I was just clean. Before we left, Mr. Harrington looked up from his notes. "Ms. Morrison," he said, "I see these cases more often than you imagine. Disrespected, ostracized parents, children who forget those who raised them." I smiled slightly. "I didn't raise Rachel to forget. I raised her to survive. Maybe it's the same thing." He handed me a copy of the draft documents and escorted me to the door. "You're doing something brave." "No," I said. I just stopped doing something stupid. At home, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Lily's name written in bold letters on the foundation file. I imagined her when she was 6, freckled face, missing front teeth, asking me to read the same book over and over again. I hoped that girl was still in there somewhere. I didn't tell Rachel about the foundation, not yet. Not out of secrecy, just out of clarity. If one day she asks, I'll answer. But for now, I wanted it to be clean, a line drawn silently. I walked into the living room and found an old photo of Lily and me, holding hands, both of us squinting in the sun. I cleaned the frame of dust and placed it on the mantelpiece where Rachel's photo used to be. The house didn't feel lighter, but it felt more like me. The next morning, I sent a letter, not an email, not a message, a real letter, handwritten. Dear Lily, it began. I don't know when you will read this, but I want you to have something that belongs only to you. Something that is not wrapped up in circumstances or guilt or expectations. I want you to use it well, not because I expect you to, but because I trust you. I always have. I didn't sign it with love, Grandma. I signed it for the girl who never made me feel invisible, M. Then I folded the paper, put it in an envelope, and placed it in the foundation folder. That same afternoon, the doorbell rang. At first, I didn't move. I thought maybe it was a delivery, but it rang again. Sharper this time. I opened the door. Rachel was standing there, red-faced and breathless, holding her phone like a badge. Mom, we need to talk. I looked at her. I really looked at her. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel smaller than her. I'm not angry, I said, but you can't fix this by talking. He opened his mouth. I raised my hand gently. Not now. And I closed the door quietly, not slamming, just a full final click. I didn't lock it, but I never opened it again. That evening, I found myself in the attic, not looking for anything, just standing among the old boxes, smelling of dust and cedar. I hadn't been up there for years, not since Tom's last winter, when we packed up the Christmas decorations and never took them down again. I sat on an old stool and dusted off a box labeled Martha Nursing Days. My own handwriting, slanted and careful. Inside were fragments of a different life, a blackened stethoscope, hospital badges, a few certificates. In one corner of the box were photographs, me in my white nurse's uniform, younger, sharper, with a weariness that had nothing to do with age. Once I was skilled, respected, people trusted me with their lives. Now I was the woman people forgot to pick up, the woman whose excuses were offered in whispers. I found another box marked Tom and M. I opened it slowly. Letters, birthday cards. One of them said, "You always knew how to bring me back to myself. Love, Tom." I held it for a long time. Now he would know what to say, or maybe he wouldn't say anything. He would just pour 2 cups of coffee, sit next to me, and let the silence hold everything words couldn't. That was his way. His honor was silent, but never weak. I realized I hadn't said his name for weeks, months, maybe never. "Tom," I said now, my voice low, like a secret. "I apologize for losing myself." I leaned back, my hand resting on the box like a warm shoulder. I hadn't always been this shrunken version of myself. I had once danced barefoot in the rain, laughed so hard it scared the dark, fought patiently when the hospital system tried to ignore them. I had sharp ideas, and I had never had to be sweet to be good. So when did I stop being Martha? The first crack began when Rachel turned 13 and said, "You don't understand, Mom," with a conviction that only a teenager can have. After that, I began to tiptoe around her moods, softening my voice, avoiding clothes she called unfashionable. Then Tom died, and I dedicated everything to him. My grief didn't take shape. His grief did. When he was at university, I became afraid of upsetting him, of pushing him further away. So I said yes to everything. The car, the rent, the quiet disappointments. I kept being useful, thinking it would make me needed, but being needed was not the same as being loved. I went downstairs, opened the wardrobe, and took out the navy blue dress I wore to the wedding. It was still on the hanger. The tissues from the store were crumpled at the bottom of the closet. I put it on slowly, smoothing the fabric over my hips. I didn't look pathetic in it. I looked balanced, like a woman who had waited in the cold and learned something in the silence. I sat at the vanity and brushed my hair, still thick, still silver. Rachel had once offered to do my hair properly for me. "No," I said, "gray is not shameful. Gray remembers." That night, I took out an old diary and wrote a single sentence on a new page. I was somebody once. I guess I still am. I didn't sleep much, but when I did, I wasn't restless. And in the morning, I woke up with something constant inside me, a kind of calm that didn't ask permission. The phone was full of unread messages from Rachel, but I didn't open a single one. At the pharmacy, with a tired expression, I stood in line behind a woman with a small child. The child kept grabbing candy bars while the woman put them back with one hand while looking for her insurance card with the other. I waited in silence, my prescriptions in a white paper bag under my seat, watching her handle the chaos with practiced calm. When my turn came, the pharmacist greeted me with the forced cheer of someone halfway through a long shift. "Ah, Mrs. Morrison, you have a purchase for Rachel's household." I paused for a moment. I didn't ask for anything. "Her husband's prescription. From your account. It's on direct debit." My fingers stiffened on the counter. Of course they were. "Can you cancel it?" I asked in a calm voice. The pharmacist hesitated. "You're in charge." "Yes, just, are you sure it's a monthly recurrence?" I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Yes, I'm sure. If you have any concerns, Rachel can handle it. They had a wedding recently. I think they're fine." She nodded, avoided my gaze, tapped a few keys and handed me a receipt. "All right." I sat on the bench outside, near the bus stop. Not that bench, not from that night. A different bench in front of the library under a yellowing maple tree. It smelled of ink in late summer. I hadn't said no in years, not like that. Not in a clear way, not without apologizing. But as I sat there, the fear I expected didn't come. There were no trembling hands, no wave of guilt, no frantic mental replay of how to explain myself. Just silence, a soft, heavy kind. The kind of silence that comes when a door that should have been closed long ago finally closes. That evening, Rachel called again. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail. "Mom, I saw you didn't pay for David's medicine. It's okay, I'll take care of it. But I wish you'd told me. We can talk about it. You know, it doesn't have to be like this. Lately, I feel like there's a wall between us. I'm just confused." Confused. That word again. It had become his shield for everything he didn't want to face. I didn't answer. Instead, I took out my diary and wrote, "When someone builds a wall to keep you out, it is not your job to tear it down. It is your job to stop waiting outside." The next morning, I went to the grocery store. For the first time in years, I shopped just for me. I didn't buy Lily's favorite cereal. I didn't grab Rachel's favorite imported coffee. I didn't check the prices, thinking about someone else's pantry. Instead, I chose a small brie cheese, a jar of good marmalade, a bottle of dry rosé, a new potted plant, basil for my kitchen window, and a pocketbook I hadn't read in years. The checkout clerk smiled. "Are you planning a quiet evening?" "Yes," I said, "and it's going to be wonderful." When I got home, I lit a candle, not because of my mood, but because I felt like it. I poured a glass of wine, made toast with marmalade and cheese, and sat in my kitchen, watching the sun warm the floor tiles. For the first time, the house didn't feel like it was waiting for anyone. It was just full of me. The message came at noon, short and sharp, like a stone thrown at the window. "Mom, what's going on? The mortgage fell through. Lily's school bill too. Are you okay? Please answer me." I didn't answer, not because I wanted to punish him, not even because I was angry. I wasn't angry in that old fussy way. It's just that the text didn't ask, "How are you?" It was just, "What's going on? Why are things not going well? Where's the money?" The concern in "Are you okay?" was empty, as if it was added for structure, not emotion. An hour later, a second message arrived. "I'm serious, Mom. This is starting to affect our credit. If there's a problem, you need to tell me." And when he still didn't answer, "I don't understand why you treat me like this after everything I've done." I laughed out loud in the kitchen, in my house, which until recently had always been quiet and tired. It was not a joyful laugh, but a necessary one. A cry of disbelief, a disbelief with nowhere else to go. Everything he did for me. I stood up, walked to the filing cabinet, and pulled out the thickest folder. It was labeled Support Rachel, with receipts and copies of checks spanning 25 years. Rent, tuition, medical bills, groceries, the failed business venture she swore would pay for itself in 6 months. Everything she'd done for me. The only thing Rachel had done for me in the last 10 years was to ask for less than usual when she felt slightly guilty. Still holding the file, I walked into the living room and sat down in Tom's old armchair. I ran my fingers along the edge of the envelope, not in anger, not in grief, not at all. I wasn't playing this game anymore. That evening he called again. I watched the screen flicker on and off, then flicker again. I ignored it all. An hour later, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. His car. He was standing there, his jacket thrown haphazardly over him, his arms crossed, his phone in his hand. I didn't open the door right away. I made him wait, not to be cruel, but to gauge something inside me, to see if the shaking would come back. He didn't come. When I finally turned the doorknob, his face lit up for half a second, then dimmed when he saw mine. "Mom," he began, "we need to talk." "Do we? I don't understand what happened. Everything went wrong. I had to call the school and postpone the tuition. I'm not paying for your life anymore, Rachel." He blinked. "But why?" I stepped outside and gently closed the door behind me, standing on the porch with him. "Because for you," I said. "I waited for hours at the bus stop, in my high heels, with a gift in my arms." He exhaled sharply as if I had punched him. "You knew it wasn't on purpose. I said we'd come back. You didn't. You didn't come back. And I saw the photos, Rachel. Just family. That wasn't coming from me. But it was about you, and you didn't change it." The silence stretched between us. "You made me sit there and then pretend it didn't happen," I continued. "What now? Am I now a problem to be solved? A check to be reactivated?" He looked out onto the porch like a scolded child. "I thought you liked to help," he said quietly. I breathed slowly. "Yes, when there is help, when there is love. But what you've been asking me for lately isn't help, Rachel. It's care." Her eyes lit up. "Mom, I didn't mean—" "I know," I said. "That's the worst part." He reached out as if to touch my arm, but I pulled back. "I'm not angry," I said, "but I'm done." And then I did what I thought I could never do. I walked back inside and closed the door gently. Behind me, it never rang again. The next morning, I called Mr. Harrington and told him we needed to finalize everything. The trust for Lily, the new will, the updated deed to the house. He asked no questions, just gave me an appointment for 2:15 that afternoon. When I arrived, the receptionist offered me tea, and for the first time in years, I accepted without asking if it would be inconvenient. It was a small thing, but important. I sat on the upholstered bench and drank my tea slowly, not because I had to wait, but because I was finally in no hurry for anyone. Mr. Harrington's office. The stack of papers was already neatly sorted. "It's all here," he said, tapping the folder. "Your new will completely excludes your daughter, as discussed. The trust for Lily is open and protected, and the property deeds now record the house in your name alone, with no co-beneficiaries. You are now completely autonomous." "Good," I said and picked up the pen. I was surprised how easy it was. No trembling, no second thoughts, just ink on paper. He watched me as I signed each document, nodding slightly. "You're not the first parent I've helped do this," he said quietly, "but I wish more had done it before it broke." "I'm not broken," I said. He smiled. "Exactly." On my way out, I passed a mother and her son in the waiting room. The woman was wearing a soft coat, the boy a blazer too big for his shoulders. The woman stroked her son's arm. The boy pretended not to notice. I saw the woman smiling, not offended, just patient. I was once like that too. But patience, too refined, turns into something else, something close to denial. At home, I opened the windows, letting the breeze in. I hadn't done that in months. I always worried about Rachel's allergies when she visited. I always set the house up for the comfort of others. But the air smelled of jasmine and distant barbecue smoke, and it was mine. The phone rang again just after 5 p.m. This time I answered, not because I was ready to forgive, but because the silence had spoken enough. Rachel's voice was hesitant. "Hi, I wasn't sure you'd pick up. I know, I saw the legal notices, the trust, the deed change. I guess you really meant it." "Yes, I was." And then there was a pause. "You could have told me first." "I did, just not in the way you like. I didn't think things were that bad." "You didn't think?" I said gently. "Because you didn't have to." Another pause, then a softer voice. "So what happens now? We don't talk? Are you done with me?" "I'm not done loving you, Rachel," I said, "but I'm done financing the fantasy that love means servitude." She gasped. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Then don't say anything. Think instead." I hung up the phone before I could find any more words. That evening, I took out a recipe card from an old tin box in my kitchen. It was one I hadn't touched since Tom died. It was his favorite, beef stew with red wine and thyme, comfort food, slow and hot. I cooked for myself, not for guests, not for holidays, but because I wanted that smell in my house. While the stew cooked over low heat, I set the table for one. My plate, my wine glass, my bread warmed in the oven. I didn't light a candle. I didn't need to prove that the meal was special. I already knew you were. Lorraine arrived just after lunch, uninvited, unannounced, just the way I like it. She walked through the kitchen door as if she owned the place, dropped a box of oatmeal cookies on the counter, and said, "You were either crying or you were alive." From the smell, I can tell you're alive. I laughed. Really? Not the tired, polite laugh he gives when he wants people to move on. I made stew yesterday, I said. And no, I haven't cried. Not lately. He raised his eyebrows. You always cry, even when the lilacs bloom early. I'm learning, I said, to feel emotions without offering them as gifts. She nodded and sat across from me, pouring herself a cup of tea without asking. Lorraine had always been that kind of friend, the kind that knows where the trophies are and doesn't apologize for being part of the furniture. I heard from Dora, whose niece works at the credit union, he said. Your daughter's having a crisis over some frozen accounts. I didn't even blink. Right. And I didn't fix it. Lorraine took a sip of her tea, studying me. Wow, she said. You finally got the axe. It wasn't an axe, more like a set of keys. I just stopped opening the same old doors. He grinned. You were always the more delicate of the two of us. I would have cut her out of my life years ago. I always thought I was helping. You were, but helping isn't healing. Sometimes it's hiding. I looked at my hands. They were steady now, no trembling. He said I should tell him before I made any changes. And did you? I did, just not the way he wanted me to. Lorraine leaned back in her chair. Do you know what I think? Do I want to know? I think you've forgotten who you are. For so long, you've been Rachel's mom, Tom's wife, that sweet lady at the clinic. You left the real Martha in the pantry, next to the good china and the real ideas. I didn't answer, not because he was wrong, but because he was right. And now, he added, I shrugged. Now I cook myself a casserole, open the windows without asking permission, write something. He tapped the table with a smile. Finally. We sat in silence for a while, sipping tea, the sun warming the kitchen floor through the window. Lorraine reached for a cookie, then looked at me. Are you ever going to let him back in? I don't know, I said honestly. I still love her. I always will, but love doesn't mean access. He nodded slowly. Amen. Before we parted, he hugged me tighter than ever, his perfume lilac and old paper. I'm proud of you, he whispered. I'm proud of myself too, I said. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a lie. After he left, I stood at the gate and watched the street. A breeze passed through the trees. There were no cars, no expectations, just the sound of my home, my breath, and a kind of peace that doesn't ask permission to exist. And I thought maybe this is what healing is like. Not applause, not closure, just a silence that no longer hurts. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, sandwiched between a gas bill and a discounted gardening brochure. I almost missed it. It was plain white, printed with my name in a young, unsteady handwriting. There was no return address. I knew it before I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of lined paper torn from a notebook. The handwriting was messy. The ink was smudged in places. Just a short paragraph. Grandma, are you okay? I don't know what happened between you and your mom, but I miss you. I think about when we used to make blueberry muffins. You always let me lick the bowl. I hope you're okay. I love you, Lily. There were no questions about money. No updates from Rachel's world. Just the voice of a 13-year-old girl who has not yet learned to turn pain into silence. I read the letter 3 times, then put it on the kitchen table and sat down next to it as if it would disappear. I didn't cry, but my throat swelled with something warm, sharp, familiar. I took a note card out of the drawer, the kind I keep for birthdays and condolence messages, and wrote carefully, slowly, in the neatest handwriting I could manage. Dear Lily, I'm fine. I just needed some quiet time to think. I miss you too. I remember the cupcakes. I still have the bowl. And yes, the batter is still the same sweetness. Come visit when you're ready. We'll bake something new. Endless love, Grandma. I walked to the mailbox in my garden, raised the red flag, and slid the envelope inside. The wind shook the lilac bush on the way home. The kitchen looked just as I had left it. My mug, my diary, Lily's note on the table like a candle. I sat and reread her words. I didn't hear Rachel in them. I didn't hear debt or guilt or performance. I only heard the one thing I thought I had lost, recognition. That afternoon, I cleaned the guest room, the room Rachel said she didn't like because the bed creaked and the sheets smelled of old soap. I changed them, not for Rachel, but for Lily. I fluffed the pillows, opened the window, and put an old storybook on the bedside table. Then I made muffins, not blueberry this time, but raspberry and white chocolate. I left one on the plate and one on the table next to the letter, as if to say, look, I still remember how to be someone's home. The doorbell didn't ring that day or the next, but I didn't check the street like I used to. I didn't count the silence as absence because this time it felt like waiting for something that might actually come. And that was enough. Before going to bed, I lit a small lamp in the guest room, just in case. Sometimes love isn't about making a big comeback. Sometimes it's to leave the light on. He didn't call or text. He just showed up. It was Saturday, a little after 2 in the afternoon. I heard the light knock. Not urgent, not demanding, just there, like a gently hopeful question. I opened the door, and there she was, Lily. Her backpack slung over one shoulder, her jacket zipped up to her chin, her hair as messy as Rachel would never allow it to be. We looked at each other for a moment. Then she smiled, shy, little crooked. "I'm here for the cake," she said. Without a word, I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't fall into my lap. She didn't cry. She walked straight to the kitchen, as she had done every summer since she was 5, dropped her purse by the door and looked at the mixing bowls on the counter. "I wasn't sure you'd want it," she said. I handed her the wooden spoon. "You licked the bowl anyway," she grinned. "Always." We didn't talk about Rachel, not at first. We measured sugar, cracked eggs, and picked raspberries from the little bush outside, her sleeves rolled up, my apron hanging over her. She asked me if we still had that old board game we used to play, the one with the plastic castles. It was. We played 2 rounds while the cakes were baking, and he beat me both times. It wasn't until the kitchen was thick with the smell of vanilla and fruit that he finally asked, "Are you angry with him?" I paused, wiped my hands on the dishcloth. "No," I said, "I'm disappointed. There's a difference." He looked at me, serious, very reminiscent of his mother. "She said you were unfair, that you excluded her." I ostracized her, yes, but after years of being asked to keep quiet in my own life. He nodded slowly. "She gets angry when I ask questions. You don't have to be afraid to ask questions." He didn't speak for a long time, then gently. "I think he doesn't want to be cruel. He just forgets that people exist for his own comfort." I looked at my grandson. He was 13, but he was already seeing things that most adults hide from him. "I think you're right," I said. We had cake in the garden. He asked me about Grandpa Tom, what he was like when he was his age. I told him that he once jumped off a roof onto a haystack and broke his wrist, and that he hated the color orange because it reminded him of hospital scrubs. We laughed. Then he said, "I think I want to come more often." I didn't answer right away. I just reached over and gently tucked her hair behind her ear. "You can always come." Not a performance, not taking sides. She smiled again, and for the first time, it was all hers. Not her mother's version, not a rehearsed smile. We spent the rest of the day reading in silence, folding laundry, listening to old records. She found my old costume jewelry and put on all 3 bracelets as she used to do. When I took her to the bus stop that evening, she shook my hand before getting on the bus. "I'm glad you wrote to me," he said, "and I'm glad you listened." I stood on the sidewalk as the bus drove away, watching the back of his head through the window. He didn't turn around, but I didn't need to, because I knew he would come back. And this time, no one needed to promise anything. She came back the following weekend and the weekend after that. No permission slips, no explanations, just Lily with her backpack and that same soft knock. She helped me plant onions in the garden, learned how to roast a chicken, and even asked if she could take some pictures of old recipe cards for a school project. Sometimes Lily would talk about her, about a test her mother was nervous about, a tense dinner, a slamming door. But mostly she talked about books, her favorite teacher, a boy who made her laugh in math class but used too much cologne. It was someone, not a version of Rachel, just Lily. Then one Thursday morning, I opened the front door and found Rachel on the porch, looking thinner, tired. She was wearing a coat too expensive for its purpose and holding a grocery bag, like some kind of peace offering. Inside was chamomile tea, scones from the bakery she used to mock, and a magazine with a sticky note. "I thought you might like gardening tips." She didn't smile. "Hi, Mom," he said. I didn't step back. I didn't open the door any further. "Why are you here?" "I wanted to see the house," she said. "I just wanted to see it again. You've lived here. You know what it looks like." "I didn't mean the walls." I crossed my arms. "Then come in and say what you have to say." He entered slowly, his eyes scanning the corridor like a stranger. He looked at the coat rack, at the framed edamame by the kitchen. "Home is where your voice is valued." It was a piece Lily had made me last month. "You've changed things," he said. "Shh." She said, "Well, I finally made room." He sat at the kitchen table, the bag untouched. "Lily talks about you all the time." "I didn't expect that, because you thought I had nothing left to offer." "That's not true, but that's how you lived." She closed her mouth tightly. "Did you stop helping?" "No," I said. "I stopped supporting." He exhaled slowly, as if trying not to break. "I'm overwhelmed. I thought you understood. You always used to." "For years I did, But then you left me on a bench on your wedding day. You let everyone call it family while I sat in silence. For once, he didn't argue. I was ashamed, she said finally. Ashamed of how it would look. You, the old house, your clothes. That wasn't shame, I said. That was cowardice. Shame would have brought you back to me. He looked down. His hands were twisting the sleeve of his coat. I didn't know how to fix it. I shook my head. So you left it for me to carry? Like everything else? I'm sorry. His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear, but he said it. I looked at her for a long time. The girl I had raised, the woman who had forgotten that I was more than a role. She was more hardened than old. It's not too late, I said, but you'll have to start all over again. She looked up. Not with Lily, not with your husband, not with me. What does that mean? It means this. You come without asking for anything. You listen. You find out who I am now, not just who I am when you need me. He nodded, unsure. I walked to the door. You can visit, but not to stay. Not yet. He stepped outside onto the porch carrying the untouched bag of donuts. He paused as he turned to leave. Lily loves you, he said. I know, I replied, because she still sees me. And I closed the door not to leave him out, because honor, once restored, has its own silent threshold. The house is quiet again, not the silence of waiting or absence or erased name. This is the silence of something earned, the kind of silence that fills a space when you no longer need to prove you belong. Lily visits twice a month now. She bakes cakes on her own, folds laundry without being asked, and once sat across from me and said, I think you're the bravest person I know. I didn't answer him. I just held his hand and let the words settle where they needed to. Rachel called last week. She didn't ask for money. She didn't make any excuses. She said Lily's been different lately, more confident, more opinionated. I think she's learning that from you, she said. I didn't say, I hope so. I just said, good. Rachel still walks carefully around me like a child on an icy lake. She didn't ask for forgiveness. We're building something smaller, slower, one conversation at a time. I don't need it to be perfect. I just need it to be real. Last Sunday, I planted bulbs in the front garden. Tulips, crocuses, daffodils, things that bloom at different times, things that don't demand applause. My knees ached and my hands trembled with the shovel, but I did it anyway. A neighbor passed by, slowing his pace. Spring will be beautiful here, he said. Yes, I told him. It's already started. Inside the house, I have my breath and my music, my photographs, my light. Nobody is organizing it now. No one is asking me to shrink or soften my edges. And when I pass the mirror in the hallway, I just stop for a moment and look. Not because I need confirmation, but because for the first time in a very long time, I see a woman I recognize. She's not angry. She is not waiting. She is not quiet because someone told her. She's quiet because she's not shouting for peace. And maybe that's the story I've always wanted to tell. Not about the day I was left behind, but about the life I found after that.